to be here. Thanks Yves and Megan and everyone else. We've been able to meet. Intia has kind of connected us with some people, so it's good to be here. But I'd like to first start out just sharing a little bit about myself, and then Amethyst will share about herself, and then we'll share about what we're doing in the Congo. So I was adopted at a young age. I was born actually in Korea, and I was actually born out of kind of a shameful birth. My father, from what the records say, he was about 30 years old, and my mother was 15. So I don't know exactly what happened there, but you know, I was kind of born in a shameful birth, and there's no record of me actually coming into this world, other than I just showed up at the doorstep of an orphanage, and that date so happened to be April 23rd. So I don't know my actual birth date, but that's the day I truly became alive, because that's when I was recognized that I was truly born. And so that's kind of interesting and significant, because you know, without that birth date, it's being made up. But you know, that's not the end of my story. You know, I could have ended up you know, on the streets, but you know what? There was a loving family in America who wasn't able to have kids. And so then my mother and my father, they adopted me at 9 months old, and I came to America. I came over in the arms of an army soldier, which he was returning from duty from Korea, returning back to the United States. And so it's just one thing after another. And then my mom always spoke life into me. No matter what it was, she always spoke life into me. And she taught me with a love and a compassion that I don't think I would have received anywhere else other than my mother, which was the divine providence of the Lord, set apart for eventually in the future, which we'll get into. But she always said that she loved me. She said that I was always wanted, and if I ever felt unloved or out of place or whatever it might be, if ever that happened, she always would say that I was the most wanted baby in the entire world, which, I mean, that just spoke confidence into me throughout my growing up and everything. I grew up in an atmosphere that did foster that confidence, and of course through Christ. But you know, my parents were divorced, but you know, my stepfather, he actually treated me like even more than my original adopted father, and he showed really what it means to have a father's heart. So we went to church, and we had a fear of the Lord, but we didn't really have like a full faith in the Lord growing up. But it was when I went to colleges where I actually became a true follower and disciple of Jesus Christ. And so I've always been a passionate person. Like ever since I was young, I've always been passionate. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well, and it's worth going all out, full out, whatever it is. And it's kind of funny because some of my friends actually used to call me Crazy Korean, or even more of them called me kamikaze, because it was either all out or whatever. And it was, and that came from snowboarding. I was really adventurous, doing rock climbing, snowboarding. I grew up in Wisconsin, where it's like -20. I mean, that's crazy enough. But growing up, I always had a passion and adventure and an adventurous heart. And you know, God uses our passions and adventures for His glory. And you know, He uses every bit of your life for His to maximum glory, to glorify Himself the most He possibly can. He chooses to use your situation for His glory. And so it wasn't in college where I finally became a true follower of Jesus Christ, of what it really means to be a full disciple. And in college, I basically got involved with campus ministry. Out of the most random thing. To me, it's funny, Amethyst and I joke around about it, but it basically revolved around a Land Rover. And you know, this is kind of funny, like what does a Land Rover have to do with anything? But it's actually about passion, because my passion was to be adventurous, to use four-wheel drive vehicles, to go do the most random, ridiculous thing you could do with a four-wheel drive vehicle. But you know what? You need four-wheel drive vehicles to be able to go to Africa. You need four-wheel drive vehicles to reach some of these remote villages. And so He was using my adventurous, passionate spirit, and then instilling that with, also God instilled that with, you know, the way that I would read the Bible. I would just read page after page after page after page after page, and then I would like, okay, there's something, missions conference, okay, I gotta go to that one, gotta go to that one, gotta go to that one. And just downloading myself with my passions that the Lord really was placing in my heart. But I'll let Amethyst continue here.
three main points before I get started. There's three things that I jotted down just before we got up here. I want you guys to make note of when we talk about our story. Number one, relationships are like bridges. They're like bridges because they'll take you one place or the other. They can take you straight to heaven, or they can take you straight to hell, on earth or actually in the reality of it. So, second point is every person in your life is ordained to be there by God. Whether it's been a bad relationship or a good relationship, every single person that He puts in your path is ordained by God, because you're going to see that our stories are so different, and so. But you can't connect yourself anywhere. God is the one who connects you. Our world teaches us that we need to make connections. We need to network our way to where we need to go. But the kingdom of God just doesn't work that way. Second one is, if you want a deep, lasting relationship, and it could be a friendship, it could be an intimate relationship with a spouse, it could be anything. If you want a deep relationship, you have to have it on the rock. And you have to have the foundation on the rock, and God has to truly be the center of it. And so, the way my life kind of started out was way different. Grew up in a Nuyorican family, came from New York, but I grew up in the deep South, and so I kind of was that round peg that was always trying to fit in a square spot. And so I got called to missions early on. Went on my first mission trip when I was 10 years old. Grew up in a very dysfunctional family, but I will say this, they really did know how to point me to Jesus. And at one of their high points, there was a lot of highs and lows inside my mom and dad's relationship, but at one of their high points, instead of going on vacation, they took me on a mission trip, and I'm so glad they did that, because that put a foundation for something inside my life. And so went on and was a part of the mudslides in Mexico, and it just impacted me in such a real way. And after that, had a fallout, definitely with the Lord. Family went downhill. At age 14, I got involved in two relationships, one before Christ and one after. But the Lord got really a hold of my heart at age 14, and it was through a huge series of events that I won't go into. But basically, the call on my life happened through a youth pastor who, he said to me, I feel like you're called to go on this trip to the Amazon. And my mom was really far away from the Lord. Just a little background on relationships as we're talking about them. Something I noticed that my family did, and it was a generational curse, is this codependence. And I see that a lot of females fall into it. A serious codependence, a lot of times their moms fell into it, and so they fall into it also. And the Lord wants us to be codependent on our spouses, but there is a point where codependence actually becomes lethal to our own relationship. We can actually find ourselves doing things that are completely not us and not according to God's plan for us. And so that was what was happening. And so every time my dad would fall, my mom would also fall with him, and he would take her on these huge roller coasters. And so I had it in my heart from the very beginning that I wanted to change that, and I wanted to be the person who would break all that. But I didn't understand codependence at that point. I thought I would think of it from the world's perspective. I'm going to rise up. I'm going to be the woman that goes to college and gets a great job and gets out of this mess that women have been in for years and years and generations in my family. So I had that already in my head, and when the Lord brought a pastor to say, I think you have the missions call on your life, and I want you to go to the Amazon, I said, oh, well, I'd love to. It's a great adventure. But in my heart, I really never thought missionary would ever be me, because I thought, I don't want to be poor. That's been my family's story for so many generations. I want to be that one that has a different story. And so, but anyway, I said I'll go because I believed in what he was saying, and I thought it would be a great adventure. And my mom said, no way, I don't even know you. My daughter is 14 years old. She was called from God. She was not in that church at all. She didn't know the pastor. So he had the audacity to call my mom on the phone and say, your daughter is called by God, and you need to send her. And my mom said, no way, God needs to give me a telephone call on the phone myself before I will send my daughter with you. You're a stranger. And at that point, I was like, God, I think I'm supposed to go. So I just started raising the money, and God did give her a phone call, because I went. And I lived on a riverboat in the Amazon for almost a month. And I was there with a pastor who was, kind of like chaperoning me. And when I came home, that was like where the complete breaking happened. I remember going to an altar and I said, God, I don't care if I'm sweeping like the floor for the rest of my life. If it's what you want for me, that is what I want to do. And so I completely changed everything in my life, and I started already planning, how can I be a missionary? One of the big things I always thought was, everyone I know that wants to be in ministry, they have a parent in ministry. And I struggle with that so much because I always saw that like a parent in ministry always helped their kid get connections with other people in ministry. And for missionaries, of course, since they're always seeking funding and since they always need connections, like it's such a big deal. And I realized that I had almost no connections at all. And I always felt like, this is just not fair. Like, you're calling me to do all this, but yet I like have no one to even talk to about it. I don't have any example in my life. As a matter of fact, my family, they're not even sure what to think about the whole thing. And so I would sit in, it came to the point where I'd sit in high school with my guidance counselor and I'd say, I want to be a missionary, I want to go to college, and I want to get my education, I just want to be a missionary, and guidance counselors don't really know what to say to that in high school. And so, but, I did do it, and I will say that there was something wonderful that happened, was I went through a wonderful period of loneliness, and a lot of times people associate loneliness with something bad, but I don't believe that's true. I think that in loneliness, that actually causes you to go to a very deep place in the Lord. And I think that it's something that should be greatly embraced because it's only for a season. Eventually God will put a husband and he will put kids in your life and you're going to actually want that loneliness back. And so, so anyway, at age 17, I actually went full-time. I arranged my life in such a way that I graduated early and I went into full-time ministry. But I want to share just a little bit, this is going along the lines with the fact that every relationship, good or bad, is God ordained. My dad left us when I was like 13 or 14 years old, and my mom always kind of was unwillingly kind of pushing the codependence on me, and when we were in like seriously bad financial situations, I remember I used to go into the church like after they'd have this like big, kitchens and all this stuff, and I'd go and I'd take like the food out of the church and I'd take it home for me and my mom to eat and so on, and it was really, really, really bad financially. I used to kind of feel like a guilt trip, like I needed to call him, and I would even call and I'd find a number and I'd just leave a message. I'd try to leave like the most pitiful message in the world to maybe guilt him into sending a check our way or to do something, but I always felt afterward like so ugly and like this just does not feel right, like I'm just trying to guilt someone into doing this. And so when I decided to actually go full-time to Africa, I called my dad and I told him, I found his number through random things, and I remember telling him, Dad, I'm calling you, and as soon as he found out his daughter was on the line, he was like, you could tell I was like quiet, like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have picked up the phone. But I told him, Dad, I'm calling to thank you for everything that you've done for me. And at that point, we hadn't talked in about 6 years or something like that. He only heard like maybe begging messages every once in a blue moon. And I said, I'm calling to thank you for everything that you've done for me. And then he says, what? What do you mean? And I said, I just want to let you know that if it weren't for you, I don't think I would have ever realized how amazing God is and how He is my provider and that He will be everything for me. And I really believe that if it wasn't for you doing something like what you've done, even though you may think it was, you probably feel horrible about it, I don't think I would have ever learned that. And so for that, I thank you. And it was like quiet, and then I hear him sobbing on the other line. And so after that, I left, and that's another story of its own. But when I went to Africa, there was a man there, and he was pursuing the vision of God in his life. And his name was Andrew. And so we met over there in Zambia, and we were going, actually, I was going up through northern Africa, and he was going down to southern Africa, and we just happened to be checking out this one organization, and it turns out that that was the organization that led us to each other. And a little background story on this, I just want to share. I went with that organization to the Amazon, and afterward, I was kind of the young one that would try to hang out with all the older people who were over 18 and able to go anywhere they wanted in the world. But I would go to their conferences, and I remember being like a 15-year-old overhearing all these stories. And I remember, and it was like, it kind of attracted people who were in their 20s in that age where they're just about to get married. So at the conferences, there was always little funny things that had to do with marriage. And I remember the guy talking said, he actually was talking about marriage. He talked about one particular thing, how a wedding would be set up and how cool it would be for a wedding to be set up. And instead of the man, waiting and the bride coming to him, if it was set up actually as Jesus has it set up, where the bride is waiting and the man comes to the bride and takes her. And I remember that I heard from the Lord that day, I was 15 years old, he said, your wedding's going to look like that, and you are going to meet the man that you are going to marry through this organization. And so later on, when I went over there at age 17, I did meet him. And even before I met him, God had given me a dream about him, and then afterward had given me another dream about him. And I didn't understand the dreams. I went to a pastor. I said, can you explain this dream to me? And that pastor happened to know who Andrew was. He said, yes, I can explain this dream to you. And this pastor is he's the most down-to-earth pastor in the world. Some pastors, they love to help people up. This was everyone knew him as the ogre pastor because he actually broke everyone up. He never hooked anybody up. So I made sure I went to the down-to-earth one, not someone who's going to say something crazy. But he said to me, I can't tell you this. You need to get your mom here if I'm going to tell you this. So we get my mom to go over his house, and he says, that dream is saying that you're supposed to marry Andrew Roth. And at that time, I'd only talked to him maybe 3 or 4 times in my whole life. And there was no thoughts of actually getting married. And there was no love at first sight. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. No, it totally was not love at first sight. Actually, some people, there was a bunch of guys who I was traveling with, and they were, a little bit younger than I was, and so we were kind of all talking around, and just, after they had left, and we're like, so, do you like anyone? And I'm like, only one of them was over the age of 18, so by law I can not say, no. Anyways, no, but that's actually a true story. There was not love at first sight. We kind of just connected on a level where we're like, oh, you want to do Frontier, go to the places people can or won't go, missions, okay, great, well, so do I, and that's about the end of it. So we stayed in contact over the years and whatever, and so then we fell in like, and then eventually fell in love, and we actually hadn't even seen each other, 5 times before?
Yeah, 6 times. Our whole relationship was over Skype, the whole thing, and the only time we'd seen each other was 6 times, and each time less than 2 weeks at a time. And so this was just a very slow-going relationship. I was in Africa, and at one point he got assigned to Latin America, another time he got assigned to Africa, and I got assigned to US. So we were just all over the place, but we eventually, what really brought us together, and I remember one of my friends even looking at me, she was even angry. She was genuinely angry. She's like, are you marrying this guy because you love him or because of his vision? And I was like, I don't know. Because we had a very, very similar vision. I mean, that was one thing I would always say. I cannot marry a guy who will say he doesn't want to bring his kids to the most dangerous places in the world. I cannot do it, because that's where I want to bring our whole family. We want to be right in the middle of it. And so when he taught, and it was funny because on the phone, I remember he said that once. He said, I want to bring my family into the places where everybody's running out. And then immediately when he said that, I was like, maybe this guy is something. And later on, there were some theological differences that got settled. And so then we definitely came. You want to share?
I will say she did hit on a good point, and that's vision, because vision is so important. And vision pretty much defined me. Remember, I'm the all or nothing, all in type of person. So this vision is kind of like, okay, I need to use four-wheel drive vehicles to go to the remote places around the world. Everyone's training me on how to drive four-wheel drive vehicles. I need to, oh, by the way, go to remote places, so I need to have like adventurous spirit. And oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the places where they're war-torn, where everyone's running out. And with that vision that the Lord really showed me, this vision only came after the revelation of this. It's that that a man, he really comes alive when he finds a mission, when he finds a purpose, and he knows his name. So he really knows who he is. So let me repeat those three things again. That a man comes alive when he finds a mission, he finds a purpose, and he knows his name. And so after I really found that's where I really found vision and really found the Lord. And the Lord just kind of orchestrated steps to just work out.
So in the middle of us dating, God had put a weeping on his heart, a weeping spirit on his heart for the country called Congo. And he had always told me about the Democratic Republic of Congo. At the time we were working in Zambia, which is a very peaceful country in Africa. But God had already put a weeping in his heart something like 4 years before we even got married. So he was already beginning to pray and plan for something that he didn't even have an okay from the organization to go on. And so what he did was, before he got engaged to me, he said, I believe that we were supposed to go to Congo. And I believe that if you don't think that you're supposed to go, then maybe you're not the right one for me. And I said, you know what? From what you're telling me about it, it sounds like the exact place I would love to go. And so we got married, and I just want to let you know just a little caveat of like how good God is. We did have that wedding that I told you about, the missions conference. They talked about that kind of wedding. We had the exact wedding, and then it just so happens, we never went to this church, but that missions conference that the Lord spoke to me about at age 14, we got married in that same church where the Lord spoke to me that word about where I'd meet my husband and how my wedding would be. So it was like God saying, you know what? I've got this, and I'm just going to go on over and over, confirm that I've got this. And so afterward, we went before our missions organization. We said, well, once we get married, we're gonna go lunch in Congo. And they said, we know nobody there. We have no contacts there. We have never worked there before. But we believe in what you're doing, and we believe that you are anointed by God. Go, and go by faith. And so we decided to go to Congo. And I can honestly say, when I talked to my mom, it was the saddest thing, because my mom knew that I had traveled to, a good, at that point, 13 countries in the world, many of them being alone as a single woman. But she was asking me, you could tell it was just so deep in her heart. She was like, Amethyst, can you just give me an address or a name of someone, just in case you guys don't come back, because I don't know anything. You guys don't have any information. I said, Mom, we don't know where we're going. We have no idea who we're going to meet there. And, you're just going to have faith just like we are. And so we got off the phone and we left to Congo. Quickly, I wanted to share the first story about the first 2 nights we were there. We ended up being at a very cheap Congolese motel, not even an expatriate hotel. We went to a very cheap Congolese hotel because we didn't know where we were going. And our contact put us there. And so we actually, for first night, we slept fine, but the second night, we woke up to the sound of soldiers raping women right outside of our door, and hearing it very vividly. And at that point, we woke up and we just prayed. We woke up about 3 o'clock. Well, I heard it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I put my hand out. I remember being really scared, because I was like, what if he feels like he has to go out and stop what's going on? And I had already kind of peered out and saw these are soldiers out there. And I was like, oh God, should I even wake him up? And so I put my hand over his mouth, and I'm like, Andrew, just wake up and listen. And I whisper that into him. And then he wakes up, and then we just prayed all the way till 7 in the morning. So that was the beginning of welcome to Congo. And but I will say that also we've been there now for 3 years, working for between 3 and 6 months. We're moving there on February 22nd. From that, now we've gone to having land, to being recognized by the United Nations as an official NGO, having cars and vehicles. So God has been good to us.
Yeah, and really everyone is connected somehow to the Congo, and you're like, wow, that's half a world away, that's in Africa, whatever, you know. But, you know, everyone is really connected. How many people have a cell phone? Everyone has a cell phone. How many people have an iPod, iPhone, whatever, you know? Multiple, you know, that's a double hands up, right? And so, really, we're all connected somehow, because the minerals used inside of the your cell phones or your tablets or whatever it is, the minerals are harvested from Congo, especially the region that we're working at. The minerals are called coltan and cassiterite, and these two precious metals make up the semiconductors and the batteries for all of our mobile phones and whatever technology we might have. And 80% of the world's consumption comes from Congo. 80% of the stockpile of all of those minerals comes from the Congo. So you can see the immense wealth and the greed that's there, let alone the diamonds and the other minerals, gold and whatnot. Also, the United States has the largest special forces operation in the Congo, because 70% of the world's uranium mines are actually in the Congo, so we don't want our uranium falling into the wrong hands. So the United States is hugely involved in the Congo, and yet Congo is suffering.
So in case you don't know, uranium is used to make our atomic bombs. So our atomic bombs are used out of the minerals in Congo, and yet most American citizens couldn't point to that place on a map.
And so really there's a fivefold vision that we developed for Congo, and it starts with prayer, because prayer brings unity across tribal lines, across different denominational lines, and from that prayer it pushes back the darkness. When you when you cross over the border from, say, here to that wall over there, that's the no man's land, as you cross that distance, you feel a spiritual shift in the atmosphere. You can literally feel darkness as you walk from just here over there, so maybe 20 yards, you can feel a physical shift in the atmosphere. And we have to push back that darkness. And then from prayer, then evangelism and discipleship. And we see people being healed. I mean, whatever your theological viewpoint is on that, we see people being healed right before our eyes, praying over them, and they're radically healed. And from there, then discipleship, raising up pastors, raising up leaders to being able to plant churches. And then from there, planting churches, we combine church planting with community development, because we believe that the church should be the center of the community. We believe that the church should be the economic center. It could be the education center. It should be the place where micro-enterprise, microfinance is developed there. And then also, because there's over 30,000 child soldiers, we work with child soldiers, so we do a rehabilitation and reintegration program with them.
I want you guys to imagine that you as a man, imagine having a family and seeing your kids taken away from you, your wife tied up and raped over and over and over again in front of your eyes. What would that do to you as a man? What would that do to you? If you didn't have a wife, let's imagine your mom. What would that do to you as a man? Imagine as a woman, if you have a baby, you know, have you ever heard of a pestle and a mortar? We use it to grind up like medicine or garlic. Well, in Africa, they have huge pestle and mortars where they grind up corn and grain, and they go ahead and they just like push it down, and they grind it up that way with their, with their arms. They use their own strength to do it. Well, when the rebel militias come into these places, they don't have the idea that they're going to just kill the people. They want to traumatize them. So what they'll actually do is take newborn babies and put them inside the pestle and mortar, and they'll right in front of the mom. What would that do to you as a woman? A lot of times, because of child soldiers, there's 30,000 of them, now there's a connotation that if you're an orphan and you have no place to go, you have no family, then probably you're one of the ones who are causing this. So imagine that as a child will come back to his village, which is getting burnt down. He never finds his mom and dad again. He goes to the next village to try to find someone who will accept him. But the next village goes on and tells him, you know what, you're the cause of this. You're the cause of this. And he goes from village to village to village to village and never finds anyone who can accept him. And then on top of that, there's death constantly being spoken over them. So after a while, there's a quote in one of our videos that says, I will go into this army and I'll stay there until I die. Because what they realize is that that's all they'll ever be to someone. So they go ahead and just do what other people are saying they'll do. So what we're dealing with is, Andrew talked about that spirit. What that spirit is, it's a fear. When there's a spiritual shift in the atmosphere, what's going on is there's an intense fear over that region. And what's going on is that fear has just been like a landmark for the enemy to just go and do whatever it wants. And not only that, there's been a bitterness, because out of fear comes serious bitterness and hatred and unforgiveness. So our whole idea with what he said with the fivefold thing is that first, you know, a lot of NGOs and people, they go in there with the idea that let's educate, let's bring education, let's bring healthcare, let's bring all these different elements to help them rebuild themselves. But how can you rebuild up people who have seen these kinds of things? There needs to be a serious healing that goes on first, so that their minds can be open, so that then they can learn. How can you teach a child who's already seen his parents killed in front of him? It's not possible. If you know anything about child psychology, the development stops as the abuse starts. And so anyway, that's our idea, is that first the gospel will go and it will penetrate their minds, and then when they can understand forgiveness and receive healing, then after that, they can actually be taught. And so what we do is we build training centers. We're at this point working on one. And the idea is, instead of saying let's go to the church, because people have been hurt by the church, people have been burnt, villages have been burnt down, sometimes people run to the church gets burnt down, everybody gets burnt down in the church with it. So church now has a strange connotation with it. So we say, come to the training center. If you're a Muslim, you come to the training center. If you're an animist, come to the training center. It doesn't matter what you are, come, and you know what? You're going to learn about how to rebuild. But when people come, they learn about Jesus, because that's the first thing they have to learn, is to forgive and to get over what's going on in their life, and to receive healing and understand that this is a supernatural forgiveness. This is a supernatural love. Because it's a supernatural love that teaches someone to actually forgive someone who killed their children. That's an absolute, that's not cheap love anymore. That's not just a prosperity gospel. And so that's kind of how we work things out. I want to encourage you guys to visit us. If you feel something pulling on your heart, I believe that this generation has a pioneer spirit on it. I believe that people are called out, and I believe that we are here to call people out of their comfort zones and also into some of the most dangerous places in the world. I believe that's a mission that's on our life, and that we will look at you in the face and say, come with us. If you guys really have something in your heart for this, I'll tell you 3 ways you can help us. The first way is, if you want to come out. We will help you get there. We'll sit down with you. We will have coffee with you. The second way you can help us is that we are also raising funds financially. So if you are at all, you're not able to go, give us, come back there, talk to us. We would love to hook you guys up. If you just want to donate a Starbucks every week to us, that'll equivalent like $15 a month, something like that. Then the third way is, if you know anybody that you can connect us with, please give us the connections. We need that. Our mission is to be a voice for the voiceless. And right now those people are voiceless. So when we stand here, we stand before you as people who are pleading for the Congolese, who are pleading for the women, who are pleading for the child soldiers, who are pleading for the men who've lost what it means to be a man. And so thank you so much. And lastly, I would like to say relationships are a big deal, because if it weren't for my relationship with this man and with this man, I wouldn't be doing what I am doing today. So thank you.